We are back for another Chris McPherson Show Daily Dose, and after having done an in-depth deep dive ahead of the Asian Women's Cup for the basketball, we now talk Asian Men's Cup, and we are here with Ben Dunn, one of our basketball gurus. Dunny, we're riding high still on the Opals. Now it's time to get behind the Boomers.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so obviously very proud of what the girls were able to achieve over there and a pretty comprehensive tournament. And yeah, now time to look at the youth and the depth of the what am I talking about? Boomers this time. So yeah, looking forward to sort of seeing how we go with probably our youngest team in quite some time.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit, and obviously we'll focus in on the Boomers quite a bit, but they head to the girls played in China. This one's going to go to Saudi Arabia, just like most things in sport. Uh, It's amazing what happens. So when we have a look at it, Australia obviously significantly the highest ranked team in this. They go in inside the top 10 in the world. The next best, I think we're really looking at Japan and New Zealand sitting just outside the top 20. And they would, on paper pose probably the biggest threats. When we look at this historically, it's only the third time the Boomers have competed in the Asian Cup, and they are 2 from 2. So looking to continue that record. Before they were there, one of the powerhouses were Iran, who'd been one of the teams that's challenged them. But we're talking about it just before off air. The last time around, a team that not a lot of people would have expected were the runners-up, and that's Lebanon. They're a team that's been 4-time runners-up in this century alone.
Yeah, they're a scrappy team. They're very physical. They play more of that European style, so they certainly pose some sort of matchup issues. They remind me of like something like a Hoosiers style team. So they're really scrappy. They get in, they do all the little things right, and they make it really challenging for all teams that they play. Like you have to be on your best when you play Lebanon because they will just pressure you non-stop, and they're going to do all the simple stuff, make the extra pass, and try and get as many easy buckets as they can. They're a really smart team.
Yeah, they certainly sort of dominate that West Asian region a lot in recent times. As you said, they've got a lot of players who are playing, in different, European leagues or have had experience in different European leagues. I think they've got one of their forwards as well spending some time in China. So, and then a couple of guys that have spent time in college systems. So they're certainly not a team to underestimate. But it leads us straight into the fact that they are probably one of the big threats for Australia in Pool A. We sit in Pool A with Lebanon, and it's going to be a tough one. We've got South Korea in there as well, and then Qatar, who I would suggest Qatar are expected to finish fourth in this pool.
Yeah, easily coming last there, Qatar. Um, they did seem to do pretty well in the qualifiers, but yeah, I just can't see them taking any wins off Lebanon or even Japan for that matter. And if Australia do what they're supposed to, I think we should go through pretty comfortably. We do have Lebanon, I think. No, they're our second game. We've got Korea first up. So yeah, I think the winner of the Lebanon Boomers game is going to top the pool and head straight through to the quarters.
Well, on that, let's talk about the Boomers squad while we're sitting in Pool A. And there's been some injuries. As you said, it's quite a young squad. It's probably not to suggest that Basketball Australia are taking this lightly by any means, but where we sit in terms of leading into pre-seasons and everything else means that there's limitations sometimes on availability, limitations on players making themselves available. But again, we've got a really talented crop of youth coming through, and they're backing them to do the job here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, touching on the age thing, I think the average age now is 23.2. I don't know how they get the point two years of age across the team. So, we've got a few young fellas like Harry Wessels, Rain Smith, Ben Henschel, and obviously Dash Daniels, who's stepping up for his first sort of senior matches. We've got Owen Foxwell in there as well. And then we've got some of the old heads with Xavier Cooks, Will Magnay, Jack McVeigh, and Jack White. Will Davo Hickey, obviously he's just fresh off his NBA Summer League experience, so he's going to come across. Rain Smith's probably for me the one that I'm really looking forward to. He's just signed with Cairns for a couple of years, and he's their big sort of marquee signing. There was talk that he wasn't even going to come back to Australia and play because heaps of teams in Europe were after him. But he's ended up signing with Cairns as part of their big push to get back into sort of the upper echelons of the NBL. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes because he played for Denver in the Summer League and he did really well in his sort of short opportunities. But his last season, over in college, he was able to shoot 41% from three. He's only 6'2" as a shooting guard, but if he's sort of working off the Foxwells and those guys, I think he's a real chance to put up some points in this tournament, especially if you got like the likes of Cooks and Magnay who are dragging players deep into the post and creating those opportunities on the 3-point line. So Jack McVeigh, obviously, he's been shooting the lights out in summer league as well. So look, I think using sort of this tournament to get some guys like Henschel and Wessels a bit of run, I think it's going to help the Boomers like for those Olympic and World Cup campaigns coming up.
Well, we know it comes down to that depth, right? It's not always about the players who are actually playing. It's about who you've got available, what you can rely on when injuries and things happen in those big tournaments. Those players that are making up the squad as well and having that experience to rely on in different situations. So that'll certainly be interesting to see. I think, as you say, Lebanon are going to be a big threat. South Korea are a team that have certainly got ability. I just, as to whether they can execute that against the likes of Australia and Lebanon for 4 quarters. I think this one will probably play out when we have a look at it, mate, in terms of, the rankings, like the Aussies sitting at 7, you've got Lebanon sitting in the 20s, then you go down to the 50s for South Korea and Qatar just inside the top 100.
Yeah, absolutely. And like teams like Guam and Chinese Taipei, and they're sort of sitting 60s, 70s, 80s in the world. So look, I don't think they're really going to be challenging, but at the same time, they've got nothing to lose. So, and these international tournaments, you can often see the little underdog come through and have all the fight in the world and put up a big challenge to some of these bigger teams, which I think is probably going to be helpful for our younger guys who are coming through and playing in the sort of first senior tournament. Doesn't have the bright shiny lights of a World Cup or an Olympic campaign, but it's certainly going to give them enough exposure at this sort of level to give them an idea of what it is like, and they'll be able to sort of uh, hopefully get the benefit of it for those future tournaments. So they've also had Josh Giddey, Dyson Daniels, and Johnny Furphy in training camp with them on the Gold Coast before they played against Colorado. So I think they're starting to understand what those systems are about. So look, I think if they can rip in, I think we're real chance of taking this one out and getting our third.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. It's an interesting one too because you talk about some of those minnows, and we'll have a quick run through the other pools in a moment. But the way this actually works out, and we're talking about this off air, is the top seeded team, a bit like in the women's, where the top seeded team out of each pool, end of the pool stage, went to the semi-finals. These guys go to the quarterfinals, and there's what you'd normally call a round of 16 playoff for the second and third ranked team. So you can go through as the third ranked team, having only, like essentially if you get one win, you should go through into the playoffs. And then, it could be about building in the right momentum in the right time, depending on who you come up against. And we'll talk about some of the other pools that might present some slightly easier paths through. It's certainly going to be interesting. And then you get the possibility, and we see this sometimes in these big basketball tournaments where a lot of teams progress through, where you see a team that has a bit of an off-pool stage. So let's just say a Lebanon, they lose to Australia and then get upset by South Korea, and then they find themselves, potentially sitting, in the same, in a very different spot to where they thought they would because they finished third instead of second, and then the path either opens up or closes down depending on who they've got. The good thing is that the way they've done it is that if you're in the same pool, you can't play your top seed from your pool. So Australia would be guaranteed if they go through in first not to see Lebanon again unless they went all the way to the final. The second and third end up on the opposite side of the draw. So it's certainly going to be interesting. But look, the projected matchups for Australia when we get through to, say, the semi-finals will be the top team that finishes in Pool B. And this one, Japan, I guess, are the big names here. They come up against Iran as well. They're another team to watch. We talked about that. Their power in this tournament hasn't been quite as high on achievements as Australia joined, but leading up to that, they were a very dominant force in this tournament. As we said, we know the Japanese in basketball, they've got a really strong domestic league and they'll give this an absolute crack. And then Guam and Syria, who, again, absolutely no disrespect, but these are two teams that are ranked outside the top 70 in the world. So this is very much about experience and exposure because they're teams that don't get to play at, those tournaments you talked about, like the World Cup. So this is their pinnacle for them. So they'll be up for this, but I don't see them matching it. I think, when we have a look at it, if you've got some Syrian or Guam heritage, and Guam's always a fascinating one for me because it's such a tiny country. They do punch above their weight in some of these sporting contests to even be inside the top 100, but they'll be very much, I would suggest, looking at that second game for them on the 8th of August when they come up against each other.
Yeah, I think you're right. And look, shout out to Guam because they're the only other Oceania team that's qualified for the tournament. So let's give them the props that they've deserved. But yeah, look, I don't see them really challenging. So I was kind of only looking at the top two for each pool. And I thought, look, Lebanon, I think they finished second. Arakji being out, we talked about that off air. So their strongest players not playing this tournament, so that's going to hurt them, but help us. No Kai Soto for the Philippines, so I think that's going to hurt them as well, and probably give New Zealand the better chance to finish first in their pool. For B, it's going to come down to the pool game for Japan and Iran. I think whoever wins that's going to go number one in the pool, but I think those two go through pretty well. And then in Group C, I've got China and Jordan as your quarterfinalists. So just too strong with that top eight, I think. Like he was saying, the sort of the series, the Guams, Chinese Taipei, they're one to watch. Chinese Taipei, like they're particularly when they're coming up against teams like China and stuff like that, they're going to be really motivated to sort of take it to the big brother. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do. But yeah, look, I think, like you said, those top eight, the ones in the sort of top 50 qualifiers, in terms of the rankings, I think we've just got too much firepower, too much experience at this sort of level to worry about those minnows.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. I think the Jordan one's an interesting one because they're the third ranked team in inverted commas in their pool, although they're not, because Saudi Arabia are the host there, so that they sit in a nice spot coming up, with China, and they should probably come through at the expense of the host. South Korea, though, when you then look at the rankings, probably the one, and again Australia in that sort of in inverted commas danger pool, because once you allow for Saudi Arabia being the host, we've then got the highest rank just outside the 50 as our third ranked team in our pool. So it's going to be a tough pool, but we kind of like that, I think, as Aussies, because it gives us that opportunity to make sure we're as battle hardened as we can be, and we should be progressing to those quarterfinals. Well, look, I'll be very surprised if Australia don't make the playoffs, because that would mean they finish fourth in the pool, and that would be the worst appearance in any sort of major sporting tournament for any Australian team, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's certainly interesting. One player I want to talk to you about, and he's a name that when I was looking through some of these squads with the Japanese, and we talked on Pool B, and that's where my eyes are around Japan versus Iran, and is Udai Baba, who people remember played a bit of basketball in the Melbourne United side. I think he's a really dynamic player. Again, he's been around the traps quite a lot. He's been playing professional basketball for nearly a decade, but he's still in his late 20s.
Yeah, I think that was a bit that was surprising for me as well, because when I saw him come over to United, and I was like, oh, that's a name that I know, like through different tournaments and stuff. And you're right, when you look at him and you're like, yeah, he's been everywhere. He's done everything across Europe. He's had stints like trying to get into summer league teams and all those sorts of things. And yeah, like you said, late 20s, but yeah, he's got all the experience in the world, and obviously a very talented player. So yeah, he's certainly going to be one to watch.
Yeah, I think the Japanese side is a side, when I look at some of their best players, they have like a really high ceiling. But unfortunately, we've seen them in some of these tournaments where they've found their floor and they haven't been up to it. They've really struggled sometimes with a few of the physical sides. But Bubba's someone who does give them a bit of rim protection and different things there.
Yeah, the other one that I quite like is the young point guard Kai Toes. I think he goes pretty well as well. He's doing pretty well in the B League over there. So it'll be interesting to sort of see him go. And I did note this morning when I was having a bit of a look is that the FIBA have done an article on him, sort of talking about him as one to watch as well. So I felt a little bit vindicated there, that I was like, oh yeah, quite like that guy, and they're talking about it too. So yeah, look, I think what they tend to struggle with is just the size, because typically, and they're the same in the women's, they've got lots of sort of people around the sort of 6'2", 6'3", which obviously is tall for a Japanese person. But when you get into these sort of international tournaments, and like we got Wessels who's sitting at 7'1", they've got the Chinese guys like Hanson Yang and stuff who are like well over 7 foot. So yeah, the size really hurts Japan, but where they make up for it is the fact that they are so good technically, they're so fast, and they are really accurate from outside the paint. So if their 3 pointers are hitting, and they're moving the ball, I think they're going to be challenging for a lot of sides to play.
Yeah, they'll be dangerous, man. So I think they've got a young guy that played some college ball at Nebraska, who was nicknamed over there the Japanese Steph Curry,
Yeah,
Tominaga, and then obviously Yuki Togoshai, which when you have a look at Yuki Togoshai out there, you will think that he is one of the kids who's meant to be cleaning the sweat off the court, because he is 5'6".
yeah, yeah, 5'7" in shoes, I think they say. And they got Harper Jr. as well, which is a very traditional Japanese name, but they got really talented guards and wing players. So look, I'm looking forward to watching them play, because they do play an exciting style of basketball. It doesn't sort of stay in anyone's hands for too long. They move the ball really well. So I like the style of play. It sort of reminds me of the old Phoenix Suns 7 seconds or less. Like they like to get out and run. They like to swing the ball. It's good to watch. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and so I'm looking forward to watching Jordan as well. They've gone down that route as well. If you talked about a couple of people that you put the asterisk next to as naturalised players, or they've got some heritage. Freddie Ibrahim's one of those. Dar Tucker's another. Like he's a naturalised American-born former. And he was good in the D League when he played there. He's going to be aggressive. He will score points. So I think they're going to be exciting to watch in terms of Pool C, and I'm really looking forward to the final game there, the 9th of August when they take on China. I think that should determine that pool as to who goes through directly to the quarterfinals. And whoever finishes second in that pool, I think is going to be a real nuisance wherever they fall
Yeah,
in that space. And then again, when you look at that, that Group C, and you go, okay, well, where does that marry up? And again, always with an eye to the Aussies. The team that finishes second there is a big chance of being Australia's quarterfinal opponent, which
yeah,
again, we should be comfortable and confident going into. But you come up against a team like Jordan, they're going to be physical. They're going to take it to you. A lot of these Asian sides play more like the European teams, as you said, because there is a lot of overlap heading into Europe because it's more geographically aligned for them. So, yeah, looking forward to that. And then, as you said, Pool D, our friends across the Dutch, the Kiwis, mate. What are we looking at there?
Look, they're again a sort of young side. I think Ruben Turangi, last I looked, he was playing. I hope that's still the case. Um, he's sort of their oldest player at what 31, 32. So they're coming across with a lot of youth as well. Again, they got quite a few guys now with that sort of college experience and stuff. So I think they should do pretty well. But I think this is much like our team, a chance for New Zealand to sort of do a lot of development and bring those guys along and give them a taste of international competition at sort of a higher level in things that aren't just necessarily friendlies or Oceania qualifiers and things like that. So yeah, I think they'll do well, particularly like I said earlier with Kai Soto being out for the Philippines. I think that makes their route to the quarters a little bit easier. But the Philippines certainly will push them, and they're going to be one of the stronger sides in Pool D as well.
Yeah, I think they certainly will be. And one that excites me to sort of watch over for the New Zealanders is obviously Mojave King. We've seen a lot of talk about him. He spent some time in the G League. He's certainly been around the NBL as well, and both the Australian and New Zealand ones. And he's one of those players that you just feel at 23, he's still got some growth to go, but I feel like he hasn't quite hit his ceiling yet.
Yeah, he's one of those sort of awkward, I guess they call like in NBA circles, they call him a tween. He's sort of in between positions. Like he can play power forward, he can play small forward. He's got ball handling abilities. He can step out and shoot from distance. He can also get in there and bang with you as well. So I think he hasn't really figured out what his identity is. And I think once he figures that out, the sky's the limit. And you could sort of see him doing the Joe Ingles style, like debuting in the NBA as like a 27, 28-year old, and then having a bit of a longer career over there. But yeah, I think it's just up to him to sort of figure out where he fits. But he is a talented player, that's for sure. Like he's been on so many watch lists since he was a young guy, and he's had, like you said, all those opportunities in G League and across the different NBLs and stuff. So yeah, he's a fantastic player, and I kind of wish he was an Aussie. I don't know why we didn't claim him. He spent enough time here. Um, so yeah, look, he will definitely be one, and he's going to sort of carry the scoring load for them. I think based on what I do know of their roster. So hopefully he has a good tournament and they get that first spot.
Yeah, certainly it's going to be interesting to see, as you say, and it's pretty much all of these pools. When you look at the top two teams we've talked about, it's going to come down to that game, the second game for these guys, Philippines versus New Zealand. Philippines will play an exciting style of basketball. As you said, there's some key outs for them, but they've still got some very handy players. I think it's young Jamie Malonzo, who's, if you go and find his clips on YouTube, there's some, Harlem Globetrotter sort of dunks and stuff. He's, what did I see? An article, an Aussie basketball scribe called him the Nick Kyrgios of tennis, but not for his behaviour, just for his theatrics on court. So I thought, yeah, I don't mind that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look, the Philippines team, like we've obviously got a long history with them going back and sort of sorted, I guess, going back a few years when we had that big brawl with them. But the Philippines, they've always been a flashy style of basketball. They like to light it up, as Butch Hayes would say. Um, so yeah, they'll get out there and they'll move the ball. They've also got Brownlee, who's like while he's a little bit older these days, he's certainly still a talent, and he's certainly going to rack up some points for them. So yeah, I think they've got a really well balanced side. But if they had the length of Kai Soto there, I think they'd be definitely sort of challenging for semis and even final. But I think him really him missing is a real loss for them, and I think that's going to see them struggle a bit.
Yeah, I think the pressure for big game players is going to fall off the Brownlee. To just say he is. I was going to say he's getting on in age, but he's still younger than you and I, so we probably shouldn't throw too many stones. And he's a bit bigger than you and I, so like,
That's true.
I think they'll be exciting to watch. They won't take a backward step. That game against New Zealand is,
No,
for mine, it's possibly one of the picks, if not the pick of all the pool games, even with an Aussie slant to that. So looking forward to that. But mate, I guess it's time to put our money where our mouth is. We've obviously got the Aussies going all the way to the final. Is it just going to be those top four sides that you see going through? Is it going to be Australia, Japan, New Zealand, working their way through, or are you expecting maybe an Iran to push through? Who do you see getting through into the semi-finals?
my semis, yeah, I've got Australia, Iran, China, and New Zealand. That's my top
Yeah.
four.
There's a part of me that wants to see Japan go on a bit more of a run here, but I don't know whether like my heart's got that. I think that they'll end up finishing second in their pool, which means that they could quite well most likely come up against New Zealand, which I actually think is not a great matchup for the Kiwis. But yeah, so we'll see how that goes. So I've actually got Japan getting through at the expense of the Kiwis in that bottom half of the draw. China, Japan semi-final on the bottom half, and then yeah, again Australia, Iran, which will be interesting to see. I've got the Aussies playing the Chinese in the
Some
final and getting
fireworks.
it done.
Yeah, well, China, Japan could have some fireworks, and that certainly would rate very well over in Asia. Um, so, look, I'm not one of those script writer people, but you could be onto something. Um, yeah, look, I think Australia, China in the final this year. I just think China's riding Hanson Young all the way to the final in this one, and the way he dominated the under-19 World Cup, how he's performed so far in all the sort of stuff leading up to the NBA draft. I think, yeah, he's on fire, and yeah, they're certainly going to be taking that one and using him as much as they can. So he's an incredibly talented player. They're calling him the Chinese Jokic. So um, it's going to be interesting, and I'm looking forward to watching him. So if he can dominate this level as well as he dominated in the youth stuff, and look, we had our own guy come through who did that quite some time ago now, but Bogut, he dominated it at a similar level at a similar age. So look, I'm not saying Hanson's going to be that good this early, but if he's sort of on that sort of trajectory, it'll be interesting to sort of see how China performs this tournament. But yeah, I think China and Australia in the final, and Aussies. I'm going to say 84-72. We'll do it comfortably in the end.
All right, now I'm going to throw you a question here that is completely unprompted. Who is your one dark horse out of those bottom four teams that you could see make it through? Mine is absolutely based on zero evidence and just the fact of where we sit geographically, and that is Guam, because it'd be a wonderful story if they could just get into those playoff rounds, if they could, just jag that upset, maybe knock off Syria in that pool game and get through. That'd be a huge story for a very tiny country when you talk about as we said, they're an island nation. I think the population's like less than 20,000.
Yeah, look, it would be great to see them, as I said, Oceania represent. But the one I had circled and wrote one to watch next to is that Chinese Taipei. I think they got all the motivation. They got a couple of good young players coming through. Um, and the pool that they're in, I think, like, are they in C? They're in with China.
No, they're
Uh,
in, they're in, they're in with New Zealand, so they don't.
Yeah, so yeah, got the Philippines. They're going to be fired up for that one. I had written that down. I just overlooked that. Yeah, so they got a Philippines. I think they'll be fired up for that one. They're a bit of a rivalry there. Anyway, through the qualifiers and stuff. So I think they'll be looking for payback, and they'll be really motivated to do well. So yeah, they're probably my one. If they can finish third, they could upset some people in that sort of the quarterfinal qualifiers. So yeah, Chinese Taipei for me.
Yeah, I think they should be pretty confident going into Iraq, and again would probably rate themselves a chance against upsetting either the Philippines or New Zealand. Probably the Philippines with a bit of absence that we talked about, and they're a slim chance of finishing second in that pool. Again we talked about it before. If there's some upsets, you could win one game and finish second in your pool. If someone wins all of their games and everyone shares the wins around, and that pool's probably the most prone to that, looking at it on the surface. And again, you look at that and go, okay, well they come through from there, and depending on what happens, you might come up against a beaten up Japan or Iran. If you can get through to potentially a quarter final, so that would be huge for them. Just depending how it all plays out, but yeah, it's it's an interesting one to watch. We're certainly looking forward to it. It all gets underway early next week. I think the 5th of August is the opening ceremony, 6th of August games, and then runs all the way through. Lots of basketball. We're going to have 6 pool games in each of the pools, so 24 games plus all of the playoff games into the quarterfinals. Then, so yeah, really looking forward. I think 36 matches in total from the 6th of August through to the 17th of August, where hopefully the Boomers do what they should do and bring home another gold.
Let's hope. And yeah, for those playing alone at home, you can watch all the games. I think ESPN is having all the games to zone, and they've also hinted on the FIBA page that their YouTube channel is going to be casting some of those as well. So plenty of options to watch a basketball. So get out there and support it, and let's see it more on the rise.
Yeah, let's keep seeing that Aussie basketball and Asian basketball on the rise. We love seeing it, and we'll see how we go. If we can wedge some time in amongst games, they're pretty back to back, but we might come back and debrief a bit of progress along the way, midpoint or something like that. But as always, Danny, great to have a chat with you. Thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing you again on a daily dose soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, mate.